there are other candidates running, at least one of which is, I would say, equally bad, if not worse. Yeah, I can leave it to your imagination, but it's pretty obvious that I'm talking about Ted Cruz. But bad in a different way. With Cruz, you have a smart person with really bad ideas, with really bad intentions. With Trump, you have, I don't know if you could call him smart. I mean, there may be a kind of intelligence there. There's a kind of emotional intelligence there, I think. He knows how to play with emotions to some degree. Basically, he knows how to project what he wants to project. I think that is his skill. And what he wants is to be the guy in charge. He wants to be the guy in the center of attention, whatever that thing is. And he knows how to project that so that people sort of go, oh, well, that's what he is. And he's spent years, he spent his entire adult life, as far as I can tell, crafting himself a personality as a savvy businessman, a great businessman, and all that. And now there's a lot of people that believe it. And the fact that he's racist and bigoted alongside of that doesn't hurt at a time when people, when a lot of racism and bigotry are just coming out in the open, and people are finally saying, okay, enough with this telling me that I can't be racist and a bigot. I hate it when you do that. I'm going to be what I want to be. I will not admit to being a racist or a bigot. I will pretend that it's something else entirely. But I am just sick of being told that I can't be what I am, and or that it's bad for me to be what I am. And so they have a candidate who speaks that same language, and they go, yes, finally, someone who speaks for me. So, yeah. So I apologize, but I don't apologize, because if he were just this crackpot who just happened to be running, like, who was the guy with the boot on his head out in New York? I can't remember his name. But, if that were Trump, then it would really not make sense to talk about him, because, yeah, he's just a nutty guy, and there are lots of those around. But no, he's the current front runner for the Republican primary, and because of that, we have to accept, not necessarily that he knows what he's talking about or that he has valid statements to make, but that he speaks for a large number of people, that his speech is supported by a large number of people. So when he says something, no matter how ridiculous or absurd or offensive it is, there are thousands and thousands of people who are saying with their votes, he speaks for me. I would like for him to speak for the entire country. So we have to talk about it. We cannot avoid it. But we don't have to concentrate only on that. So I've got a couple other stories here. This one from USA Today, not necessarily noted for in-depth reporting, but we'll read it anyway. So this is entitled, How We Got Here, the Many Attempts to Reform Immigration and Secure the Border. So this, we've actually read something very similar to this before, but I'm going to read it again because it pays to be aware of this stuff and to remember this stuff when we talk about this topic. So, okay, it begins, immigration has become a flashpoint in the presidential race. Candidates have debated how to address the approximately 11 million undocumented immigrants living in the U.S., secure the nation's borders, and create a system that encourages legal immigration that is more responsive to labor and economic needs. Here is a look back at major immigration laws, proposals, and political developments that led to this point. Excuse me. So, October 3rd, 1965. President Lyndon Johnson signs the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965, passed by the Democratic controlled Congress. Afterwards, immigration to the U.S. shifts dramatically with more people coming from Latin America, Asia, and Africa. The law replaced the old U.S. quota system based on national origin, which favored immigration from European countries, with a new, more open system that introduced the concept of family-sponsored migration. Okay, November 1986. President Ronald Reagan signs the Immigration Reform and Control Act, also known as the 1986 Amnesty, allowing roughly 2.7 million undocumented immigrants to legalize their status. The legislation, which took 5 years to pass, was sponsored by Senator Alan Simpson of Wyoming and Representative Romano Mazzoli of Kentucky. It also, for the first time, creates sanctions for employers who knowingly hire or recruit immigrants not authorized to work. November 1994, California voters passed Proposition 187, a ballot referendum banning illegal immigrants from receiving health care, public education, and other social services. Passed in response to a surge in the state's illegal immigrant population, it was challenged in courts, ruled unconstitutional, and never took effect. Widely credited with altering California's political landscape from a red to blue state by galvanizing large numbers of Latino and Asian immigrants to register to vote. August/September 1996. President Bill Clinton signs the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Act and the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act as part of an overhaul of the nation's entire welfare and immigration systems negotiated with the Republicans. The first bill blocks legal immigrants, in addition to illegal immigrants, from receiving food stamps and other public benefits, in an effort to ensure immigrants aren't coming to the U.S. to collect welfare. Ooh. Some benefits are later restored to legal immigrants. The second bill is aimed at stemming rising illegal immigration and beefing up border security. It toughens penalties for illegal immigrants, expanded the number of crimes that could be used to deport immigrants, further restricted public benefits to legal immigrants, increased the number of Border Patrol agents, and created the framework for 287G program that lets local police double as federal immigration enforcement officers. Cannot thank him for that one. Okay, February 2001. President George W. Bush, less than a month after taking office, meets with Mexican President, I can't talk today for some reason, Vicente Fox, to discuss a possible migration accord in response to the growing numbers of Mexicans crossing the border illegally to work in the United States. Key points called for allowing illegal immigrants to gain legal status and creating a guest worker program allowing more Mexicans to come legally to the U.S. to work. The accord, however, is dashed by the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks. The post-9/11 USA Patriot Act broadened the terrorism grounds for excluding people from other countries from entering the U.S. and increased monitoring of international students. December 2005. House passes the Border Protection, Anti-Terrorism, and Illegal Immigration Control Act, co-sponsored by U.S. Representatives James Sensenbrenner and Peter King. So you know it's got to be bad. The bill is intended to crack down on illegal immigration by declaring immigration violations felony crimes rather than civil offenses. It also beefs up border security and worksite enforcement. It ignites massive protests across the country in favor of comprehensive immigration reform. The bill fails in the Senate, where McCain and Kennedy had been collaborating on comprehensive immigration reform. We're getting closer to the present. April 2006. More than 100,000 immigrants and supporters marched in Chicago to protest the Sensenbrenner bill, saying it would turn maids, busboys, and cooks into criminals for violating immigration laws. The Chicago march led to more protests nationwide, including a march to the Phoenix office of Senator John Kyle of Arizona on March 24 that drew 20,000 people. On April 10th, in the largest single-day protest in U.S. history, hundreds of thousands of people marched in more than 100 cities, including Phoenix, to press Congress to reject the Sensenbrenner bill and instead pass reforms that include a program to let millions of undocumented immigrants legalize their status. May 25th, 2006. Senate passes the Comprehensive Immigration Reform Act, a bipartisan bill spearheaded by McCain and Kennedy. It increased border security and immigration enforcement, created a broad guest worker program, and included a program to legalize millions of undocumented immigrants. It fails in the House. 2007. Secure Borders, Economic Opportunity and Immigration Reform Act, a more conservative version of the failed Comprehensive Immigration Reform Act, was introduced. The so-called Grand Bargain was spearheaded by Kyle and Kennedy, included a legalization program for undocumented immigrants, but required them to return to home countries before applying for permanent residency. July 14th, 15th, 2008. Speaking in San Diego, then Senator Barack Obama, the presumptive Democratic nominee for president, promises the National Council of La Raza, a Hispanic civil rights organization, that he would make comprehensive immigration reform a top priority of his first year in the White House. In November, Obama won the presidency, handily defeated McCain among Latino voters. April 23rd, 2010. Arizona Governor Jan Brewer signs Senate Bill 1070, a tough immigration enforcement measure meant to drive illegal immigrants out and discourage more from coming, primarily by requiring local officials to help federal authorities identify illegal immigrants so they could be deported. It sparked nationwide protests and rallies, boycotts and legal battles, and ignited a national debate over the role of local and state governments in enforcing federal immigration laws. Other states passed similar versions. June 15th, 2012. Obama announces a new policy to let dreamers brought to the U.S. illegally as children to apply for deportation deferments, a way of remaining in the country temporarily without the threat of deportation. Those approved could receive work permits, allowing them to work legally. Obama characterized the policy as a stopgap measure until Congress could pass more permanent solutions, such as the DREAM Act. The move helped shore up support with Latino voters upset over the record number of deportations during his first term. November 6th. 2012. Obama wins re-election with more than 70% of the Latino vote. Their overwhelming support for Obama over Republican Mitt Romney prompted many Republican leaders to begin calling for immigration reform that included a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants in order to reach out to Hispanics and stop the fast-growing number of new Latino voters from flocking to the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party. The Democratic Party. Oh, I should just stop talking. Okay, January 28th, 2013. Dateline, January 28th. A bipartisan group of 8 senators made up of 4 Republicans and 4 Democrats unveils a comprehensive immigration reform framework calling for a path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants contingent on securing the border. Their legislation passed the Senate later in the year but does not become law after failing in the Republican-controlled House of Representatives. And what they don't point out here, it failed to even get a vote. It didn't fail there. It wasn't even voted on. It was not allowed to come to a vote. Finally, Dateline, November 20th, 2014. Obama uses his executive authority to expand deportation deferments for dreamers and also offer deportation deferments to undocumented parents with children who are either U.S. citizens or legal residents. The programs are put on hold after Texas and 24 other states, including Arizona, file a lawsuit claiming Obama acted illegally. The Supreme Court is considering whether to rule on the lawsuit. Okay, not everything here is entirely correct, but you get the general idea. So this is just recent news. I mean, this stuff goes back years and years and years. But you can see that the trend tends to be toward more and more conservative, more and more law and ordery types of things. And it's not getting any better. There's a lot of talk, but sadly, Obama said a lot of good things, but he's had kind of a mixed record on this. More than kind of a mixed record. He's deporter in chief, as they call him. Under his watch, many people have been deported. Way too many. And so it's a little difficult. If he were running again, I think he would have a very hard time gaining much support, except if he were running against, say, Trump, for example, in which case you couldn't help but support him because anything would be better in terms of immigration. Okay, we're running low on time here. But I wanted to. Okay, I'll just read this. It's self-evident why I chose this one. It's entitled "Two Parties, Two Radically Different Visions on Immigration." This is from the Chicago Tribune. So viewers watching the presidential debates this month have been treated to two radically different prognoses and prescriptions for the U.S. immigration system. In Democratic forums, Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders argue that deportations are ripping apart hardworking, undocumented people, I think families, who are merely trying to make a good life for their families, and that the president must show them mercy even if it means stretching the limits of the law. In Republican debates, led by frontrunner Donald Trump, the southern border is described as open and unenforced, with the immigrants who pour across it illegally taking jobs from Americans, driving down wages, and even committing murder in the process. The answer, to hear Republicans tell it, is an immediate crackdown. For the estimated 11 million undocumented immigrants already in the United States, the outcome of the debate could mean the difference between relief from a life lived in the shadows and a rush to mass deportation. Leading Republican presidential candidates favor mass deportation, and leading Democratic presidential candidates oppose most deportations, said Frank Sherry, an activist with the Pro-Immigration America's Voice. The GOP wants to stop executive actions that will benefit undocumented immigrants, and Democrats want to enact them and go further. Republicans have lurched right, and Democrats have leaned in. What was once an issue ripe for bipartisan cooperation has become a partisan dogfight. One of the reasons that immigration is shaping up to be a defining partisan issue for the general election is that it has become entangled with larger economic and national security debates. In recent presidential elections, the immigration issue did not rise to the top of salient issues. I think that this election could be different because Mexican immigration has conflated with the refugee crisis in Europe, the effect of free trade on U.S. workers, and the weak wage trends of the U.S. blue-collar workers, said Bruce E. Kane, a political scientist who teaches at Stanford University. Clinton has been pulled to the left, most recently in recent debate. What? Okay, I'm going to read this as he said it. Clinton has been pulled to the left, most recently in recent debate to the left of the current administration policies with respect to deportations. Make of that what you will. So yes, this will be the largest contrast on this issue in a presidential election in decades. Trump has called for deporting all undocumented immigrants, building a wall on the southern border, and cutting legal immigration levels. Republican rivals Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, and John Kasich agree that the top priority on immigration must be to close the border. I'm not playing to anybody's fantasies. I'm playing to the fact that our country is in trouble, that we have a tremendous problem with crime. The border is a disaster. It's like a piece of Swiss cheese, Trump said at a March 3 debate. We're going to stop it. We're going to stop people from coming into our country illegally. We're going to stop it. Something tells me that they edited this for clarity because he doesn't speak quite that coherently, but yeah, you get the point. As the base has flocked to Trump's immigration restrictionism, Cruz and Rubio have endorsed building a wall on the U.S.-Mexico border. That's ridiculous. Cruz has gone from supporting an expansion of legal immigration in 2013 to calling for restricting it, while Rubio has endorsed tightening the system to ensure that criminals and terrorists don't exploit it. Yes, they're exploiting it all over the place. In their immigration policy blueprints, Trump and Cruz have called for new restrictions on H-1B visas for skilled guest workers, taking aim at a business-backed program that faced scant Republican skepticism just 3 years ago. In a March 10th debate in Miami, the Republicans were grilled about cutting legal immigration. Trump called the H-1B skilled worker visa program very, very bad for workers in the U.S. Rubio said we should be stricter in how we enforce it, so U.S. companies prioritize hiring American workers. Cruz lamented that the U.S. is bringing in far too many low-skilled workers. What that is doing is driving down the wages of hard-working Americans. Our system isn't working. The two Democratic candidates, by contrast, are competing over who would be more welcoming to immigrants. In a March 9th debate held just 8 miles away from where the Republicans gathered the following night, Clinton, the frontrunner, made the usual move of criticizing President Barack Obama's deportation policy as too harsh and promised to deport only criminals. I will not deport children. I would not deport children. I do not want to deport family members either, Clinton said, adding that she would use her authority to stop the raids, stop the roundups, stop the deporting of people who are living here doing their jobs, and that's my priority. Rival Sanders also said Obama was wrong on this issue of deportation and vowed not to deport children. The audience of the Univision-sponsored debate applauded. Sanders attacked Clinton for saying in 2014 that new unaccompanied minors from Central America should be sent home. Clinton hit Sanders for voting to block immigration reform in 2007. Each downplayed their past heresies. Both Clinton and Sanders have unveiled proposals emphasizing a path to citizenship for the 11 million undocumented immigrants estimated to be in the country, and pushed to use executive action to protect people who aren't criminals. The issue is divisive for both parties, but the Democratic base has become more Latino and hence more pro-immigrant, while the Republicans have inherited more of the white nativist vote, Kane said. The Republican shift is dramatic. President George W. Bush championed a path to citizenship during his second term, while conservative icon President Ronald Reagan signed a bill in 1986 granting amnesty and eventual citizenship to people in the country illegally. In 2013, 14 Republicans voted for a bill to provide a pathway to citizenship and expand legal immigration limits, including Rubio, who ended up paying a steep price for the Republicans and went on to abandon it, which passed the Democratic-led Senate 68-32. The bill went nowhere in the House, but a Senate vote like that would be unimaginable today. After Obama cruised to re-election in 2012, thanks in part to winning more than 70% of the vote among Hispanics and Asian Americans, the Republican National Committee released a postmortem urging its candidates to be more welcoming of immigrants in order for the party to remain viable in national elections. It was an implicit rebuke to GOP nominee Mitt Romney, who called for creating conditions that would lead to self-deportation of undocumented immigrants. But Republican voters have decided to move in the opposite direction. There are two different theories in this election. One is that there are enough angry white people who haven't been sufficiently tapped, and that if we are only conservative enough, we can drive them to the polls, John Freary, a Republican strategist and lobbyist, said in an email. The other theory studies the basic demographics of the country and constructs a strategy based on those demographics. I have been a proponent of the second theory. We have decided as a party to pursue the first. As a result, it is unlikely that we will win this presidential election. You said that again. Meanwhile, Democratic resistance to more open immigration policies has all but vanished. Every Senate Democrat, as well as Sanders, voted for the 2013 bill, a contrast from 2007, when 15 members of the party, along with Sanders, an independent, joined Republicans in a vote to block Bush's immigration effort. This election does seem to have the biggest difference on immigration between the two parties that we've seen in a long time, at least as long as I can remember. That's regardless of who gets nominated, said Mark Krikorian, an activist for the Center of Immigration Studies, which seeks to cut immigration. You're turning the knobs and it's becoming clear what the options are, and that's useful, I think, for policymaking. This issue used to be bipartisan in a bad way. There were high immigration Republicans and Democrats, and there were some high immigration and low immigration Democrats, Krikorian said. There wasn't really all that sharp a distinction, and the issue has become increasingly partisan. I don't use that as a derogatory term. I do. He doesn't. The extent to which the next president reshapes the immigration system depends on the makeup of Congress in 2017. A wave election that gives one party total control could pave the way for dramatic changes. A divided legislature may produce more gridlock, leaving in place a status quo that both sides overwhelmingly believe is broken. Clinton and Sanders are drifting left of Obama, who has a complicated record on immigration. As of January 2016, the president had deported 2.5 million undocumented people, more than any other president in U.S. history. He enacted legislation in 2010 to beef up border security by $600 million. In June 2012, he rolled out an executive program to give deportation relief and 2-year work permits to certain young people who had been living in the U.S. for years. In November, I went too far. Where are we? Where are we? Oh, okay, sorry. I kept scrolling. In November 2014, after the House rejected his attempts to let people in the country illegally earn citizenship, and after one Hispanic leader labeled him the deporter-in-chief, Obama used his executive authority to expand his deportation relief to some 5 million people by covering parents of U.S. citizens, as long as they hadn't committed crimes. The order is on hold as the Supreme Court prepares to hear a Republican-led lawsuit to overturn it. Obama's executives, there should be plural, are themselves a hotly debated topic in the 2016 election. It should be Obama's executive actions are themselves a hotly debated topic in the 2016 election. Both Clinton and Sanders have promised to protect and expand Obama's deportation relief to cover the parents of so-called dreamers, the young people protected by Obama's 2012 order, even though the Obama White House concluded in 2014 that such a move would exceed the limits of its legal authority. By contrast, every Republican candidate vows to undo both the executive programs, viewing them as unconstitutional. The next president could determine with the stroke of a pen whether millions of people can stay in the U.S. or be forcibly removed. The one silver lining of Obama abusing executive power is that everything done with executive power can be undone with executive power, and I intend to do that, Cruz said in a March 10th debate. When I led the fight against amnesty, he added, it's because I am standing with the people. The angry white people, I guess. Anyway, so there you have it. That's it. That's the end of the show. Immigration is politics. Well, it isn't politics. Immigration is political, and you can't get away from that. And it's difficult to get away from the way it is being used as a tool politically. You can see both parties now have just staked out positions that are diametrically opposed to each other.